indie game garden.
Val Hawes is a 3D character artist, game maker, and community organizer who embodies the exact kind of grassroots joy in games that Indie Game Garden strives to celebrate. Val specializes in stylized animals and creatures for the games that she works on. She's been working in the games industry since 2016 and is passionate about game jams. So much so that she, through a process we'll discuss on the podcast that is beautifully organic, has become the chair for RVA Game Jams, or the co-chair, I should say, which is Richmond, Virginia's homegrown game dev community. She hosts a number of free games on her itch, velociraptor.itch.io, and for her day job, she works at Double Dagger Studio, the makers of Little Kitty, Big City. It's such a joy to have her on the show today. Well, Val, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you on the show. To start out, I'd love to hear more about your art journey. What's your relationship with art been like throughout your life? And how did you eventually land on your passion for character art and specifically 3D character art?
Oh, thanks for having me. I was definitely always an art kid. So I've always loved animals and creatures and Pokemon and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And my mom was also always doing art around the house. Like she was always doing home projects. She like painted murals in my bedroom and stuff like that. Little characters from children's books that I like and things like that. So that spirit of like being encouraged to do art and make it a part of my life was definitely always there from when I was a kid. But I was always drawing on the walls with crayons. And, you know, I was just the art kid for sure. For character art and 3D art specifically, it was kind of a journey from realizing that, like, I did a lot of digital online art kind of stuff as a kid. I spent a lot of time in browser games, Neopets, and places like that, where I kind of learned HTML, CSS, and like how to make kind of interactive web pages. And it kind of was just this line that like led me into game art, but it wasn't really like I sat down and said I want to make characters for games. It just kind of appeared before me as like a career path in college that made sense for the things that I like, just from like following my passions of art and characters, I guess.
Building on the love of art, what led you to games in particular? What are some of your core memories with gaming, and what would you say is the game that influences your art style the most?
Oh, so yeah, I had an older brother, so a lot of my core memories are like watching my older brother play Doom and stuff like that. And I was really into the creatures, you know.
Yeah.
And Pokemon was always like a big formative one. I was always like drawing my own Pokemon and playing all the games with my friends, and it was like a thing throughout my life. But the one game that definitely influenced my art style and my whole trajectory to games was Okami for the PS2. Which was like, one, it was like a game where you get to play as an animal, which is why it appealed to me in the first place. But also it's like the whole game is done in this like Japanese traditional art style. And the game is all in 3D. And you can unlock like concept art and stuff when you play this game, and you do little challenges. And then I had this like, I was like 14 maybe, and I was like, oh my God, it's someone's job to do all this. People spend their whole day like designing this stuff, and it's like a real thing that I could work towards doing. And it definitely started my love for 3D art and translating like illustrated art styles into 3D. So like making non-traditional looking things, like video games, like translating real traditional art styles into an interactive video game. And like that whole space is really more where my art style is like being inspired by different things and then pulling them into games.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind just hearing about like your perspective as someone who loved art and then interacted with a game that meant a lot to you, where you're unlocking concept art, is something where for me as a game player, of course, I'm familiar with the concept of like unlocking art or having unlockables be like puzzle pieces that eventually reveal a portrait or something along those lines. That's kind of alternative to the game art style. And it's never a perspective that I've had as someone who's a little less art inclined, particularly growing up, to like think about how games are, you know, art made by artists and people who are really passionate about that stuff. And it's so cool to think about how, you know, someone in your position making games in the past, and like doing the art for games, is like it would be really cool to include this as kind of like a little Easter egg for another artist to kind of inspire them and bring them forward. So I love that perspective. And I think now would be, yeah, as good a time as any to ask about the journey of what did you study in college? What brought you to kind of the games industry from a more like formal building skills perspective?
Yeah, I definitely thought going into college I was going to be a concept artist because that was mostly what I had like enough skill in to pursue something was drawing, and it's the most accessible out of all of the different disciplines too. And so I went to SCAD for interactive design and game development, thinking I was just going to focus on concept art, or maybe even pivot to a concept art degree, depending on the classes and stuff. I didn't super know going into it. But it ended up being a lot more 3D focused, and a lot of it was like very realistic props, AAA kind of stuff. And it's good that I learned those things, but I definitely was not inspired by those things. And all of my professors and stuff were pretty like, well, that's what we teach, and that's kind of what I can tell you if it's good or bad, and if you're on the right track or not. But I was really inspired by like more colorful stuff, or like Nintendo like stuff, or indie games, like this alternate art style kind of thing. And if I wasn't, my first attempts at those things were in college, and they were being kind of assessed by these professors. And like, well, you're not good enough at it yet. You should probably move back towards this like realistic kind of gritty military stuff. And I was like, I really don't want to. What do I do? Am I just not cut out for games? Was kind of the feeling. And I took one class with a professor who left right after that class was taken, and he was a sculptor. And it was a ZBrush sculpting class, so it was more expressive and a lot less technical. It's a lot more like sculpting with clay, but digitally. And that's how a lot of characters are designed and stuff. And you can paint directly onto the models. And it felt much more natural as somebody who draws versus like a really crunchy 3D application like Blender or Maya, which is like really, it's not expressive. It's not like drawing. It's just really like UI everywhere, very complicated kind of stuff where it takes all of the little movements that would just be kind of a brushstroke and turns it into like, here's 3 things you have to push and values you have to change with the slider or whatever. And so that really was like, it unlocked something. And he was very like, oh, you should definitely pursue this stuff because you seem like you really enjoy it, the character modeling. And I was like, oh, this is like way better than all the other stuff that I've been doing. And I was like, oh, that is like, everything clicked, right? And I was kind of confident enough after that to be like, I think I can do this as long as I go all in on it and don't get distracted trying to like appease like what people think the portfolio should look like or whatever. So I ended up with this very colorful creature-filled portfolio, and I ended up getting colorful creature-filled jobs in games because of that. Because my portfolio only has that, right? So when people want that, I have a niche. So that was kind of my journey into specifically character art through college.
I'm constantly both terrified but also astounded by the beauty of how like just chance decisions, or like, chance like going to take that ZBrush class can like totally change the trajectory of potentially, if you had gone, I don't know necessarily exactly what route you were traveling before then, but like it's amazing to hear that one moment in time and one interaction with a professor, like you said, that left right after that you may never have met, could lead you towards such a, it seems like, fulfilling career. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I'm so glad. And it's awesome that your persistence in pursuing what you earnestly enjoyed was able to achieve such an outcome. And that's kind of what this whole show is about. So I'm fascinated by that. I'm really excited about that happened. And you've been working in the games industry since 2016. It's an industry notorious for causing burnout. And I was just wondering, like, what keeps you coming back? How has your experience to this point been as someone making games for your career?
Oh yeah, for me it's definitely 100% the people that keep me coming back. I'm kind of shielded from the double and triple A like work churn cycle because
Yeah.
I work in indie games specifically, and it is very different. Like I've done contract work with bigger companies, and it feels totally different. To kind of be in that ecosystem and feel the expectations and like how much the product you're making is kind of like so many steps removed from the person who's letting you make it and their
Right.
expectations on you. Where I've mostly worked on very small teams of people who are very, very passionate. And those people are also, especially in indie games, super, super aware that the industry is so prone to burnout. And I think you kind of make a trade off in indie games where you're like, you're probably going to get paid less and you're going to get fewer benefits than maybe you would at a big company because they have fewer resources. But the people are just as passionate and they're going to treat you more like a person and it's going to feel less like a job. It's still a job, but it's not going to feel like a capital J, like LinkedIn job.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's so key to staving off the burnout is feeling closer to the projects you're working on, more like you have ownership over them. So you're not just, yeah, like clocking in and out and you're not doing something necessarily like against your will in that sense. Like the will is bound up in enjoying the people and enjoying the experience. And building on that, I was wondering what your current experience at Double Dagger Studio is like.
Yeah, Double Dagger is really cool. It's I've been working on that game since before the pandemic. We're working on Little Kitty Big City, and we got found by basically everybody on that team works remotely for Matt, who is the studio director, lead
Hmm.
developer, who is a Valve veteran. He worked there for like 12 years or something. He worked on all the games. So it's like very inspiring to work for somebody who has had this long history in games, who's also breaking away to do their own independent thing. But he found all of us on like Twitter. He was like, I need someone to model a cat for me. And I was like, I can model a cat for you. Like, awesome. And he just was like, let's do an art test. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do an art test real quick. That sounds awesome. But I never thought it was going to be like this big game that I was going to end up working on for like a long time.
Yeah.
Or that it would turn out to be like this real studio with a bunch of people, employees, and contractors, and we all live all over the place, which I think is one of the beautiful things about indie games is like you don't really need the office. There's so
Yeah.
many passionate people, and online you can connect those people, and they'll just kind of like they'll figure it out and make it work. You know, it's like very flexible to work that way.
Yeah. And it also makes sense that that is where the job feels less like a capital J job, like you said, because everyone is kind of there just by the will and the passion. And that's the uniting force rather than like being forced to return to office after the pandemic or what have you. So, that's great to hear. And Little Kitty Big City is such an accomplishment. It's so cool that you've worked on it. I was wondering how, amidst this journey with games, you ended up becoming chair for RVA Game Jams, which is kind of like, I know, separate from your day job and more about like locating yourself in a place and like establishing community around games in that place. And yeah, I was just wondering about that journey.
Yeah, so I'm from Richmond originally. I left to go to school in Savannah, and then I came
Hmm.
back after graduating. And I wasn't sure how long I was going to stick around in Richmond, if a job was going to take me somewhere else. And it just didn't. Everything ended up being remote for me, which is sort
Yeah.
of interesting. But I was really missing being around other people who cared about games as much as me, and being in like a major full of students and graduating with all these people who are just constantly on your level when it comes to your passion for games. It was like
Yeah.
really, really hard to lose that. And we don't really have much games industry, like real industry here in RVA, but there was already RVA Game Jams. I found it on Facebook or something, a website I no
Yeah.
longer use, right? And I was like, oh, people are doing game jams here. And so there was a group that already existed for a few years, and I joined their Discord and immediately got like looped up with everybody. That was maybe 2018. And
Hmm.
then there were already other people kind of running it. I think they were trying to do like a nonprofit type thing, but it was hard to get three people to be kind of full time, like really committed to it with their jobs and all this other stuff. And people really wanted it to keep going. But I think making that next step into kind of making it more of a business, not like, you know, a business entity,
Right.
it just like never got the momentum to do that. And then the pandemic happened and life happened, and it just became like the thought of trying to pick it all up again, I think, became like hard for the people who were running it. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, what if we don't do that? And I have a lot of free time and I'm really missing game jams and all these things really badly because all my work is remote. And
Yeah.
the pandemic was even more isolating. And that Discord and my friends that I've made in that Discord were really, I was like very appreciative for having that. So I stepped up and was like, if no one's going to stop me, I would like to start, doing meetups and all the other stuff again. And people were like, yeah, okay. So yeah, that's kind of, it kind of was like a gradual, like, I'm going to start doing stuff. Tell me if you hate it and I'll stop doing it,
Yeah.
It wasn't really like a play to be a chair. I called myself like the lead organizer person or the main person for a while. I didn't really like, it wasn't really like a structured thing. I'm like, I just don't want RVA Game Jams to not be here. It was more about
Yeah.
that, like not losing that. And you could kind of feel everybody drifting from it. And I was like, oh, I want to wrangle it back in and do really cool jams again. Because we definitely have a lot of people who are interested in making games who are not professionals, but they're hobbyists. And it's like a totally different, it nurtures a totally different side of like what makes art and games fun for me, to have this non-commercial space to do jams.
That's beautiful. I think it's particularly inspiring for me to hear how, I don't know, I'm in a space now where I think about the world and I get really overwhelmed and I stop thinking about the world, and I feel like a lot of that is due to like people kind of angling and all the politics involved and like gaining power and like all the people who are being vocal, whether it's behind companies, politics, what have you, are like, it's been such a, planned out thing, it seems like, for them to have grabbed whatever power they have. And that's what brings me to games and grassroots games in particular. And that story of just you kind of being like, hey, like, I'm here and I still want to do this. And that led you to, the in air quotes chair position is so awesome. Particularly in a place where it's like a smaller game scene, and wanting to keep that connective tissue active and engaged is beautiful. And I was wondering, kind of building on that, what your favorite memory as a game jam participant is. Perhaps there's a different one as an organizer. I would just love to hear more about kind of the game jam experience from your perspective and the value you find there.
Yeah, definitely. I should also say that technically, as of this year, I'm now co-chair of RVA Game Jams. My friend Momin, who has always been a longtime organizer, he was also there before I was, has kind of like returned to the position of helping share the load, because now we have so many events and stuff. It's too much for just me, so it's him, but it's also all the organizers, the regulars who are there too. I just want to make sure that gets in there because his contributions are really important too. But yeah, I would say favorite memories. I have so many of them. I've done so many game jams now. Definitely Cabin Jam is my favorite event, that we rent a big house somewhere. Usually the idea was that it would be like in the woods or in the mountains, like in a more remote place. And we get like 20, 30 people, and we rent this big place, split the cost, and then we spend 48 hours jamming, and we do a kickoff and a showcase at the house. And it's kind of like we get away from everything and do our jam. And the last one we did last year, the house was like the craziest thing. We pull up and it was already like kind of in the middle of nowhere, like in between Virginia, West Virginia. We were like running like no cell service, and we're like, oh, I hope everyone gets here on time. Like it was, a little bit chaotic. But we show up to the house and some other folks are already there, and they're like, Val, you have to see this. And I was like, okay. And they're like, you go up here, you go across the walkway. I'm like, there's a walkway, and it's like this crazy yard, and it's like a sheer mountain side, and there's 3 doors, like wooden doors that are like built into the rock. And you open the first door and it's just like a hanging rope that goes into like a black cavern. It's just like a cave. And so there's 3 different doors that just go into a cave system, and they're like full of spiders. And we're just like, what is happening in this house? It didn't have this on the listing. Like it had like there's a hot tub that doesn't work and all this other stuff, but you didn't mention that there's like caves on the property and ropes to go into the caves. So I don't know, everything about that environment was just really like creatively stimulating. We would just be like, working on our games, and someone would be like, I think I'm just gonna go to the caves. I think I just need to go be in the caves for a little bit. People made games about the caves. Like it was just a delightful surprise. It definitely had summer camp energy. There was a little theater in the upper room that was like a little home theater room with little chairs that were all different colors. And somebody was up there in like an inflatable kayak with their laptop, and they were streaming their development on like a projector onto the wall, and they were just like hanging out in their thing. Like it was just like nonsense, but everyone was having so much fun. I don't think I'm ever like, I hope we can go back to that house one day. I feel like we're going to look it up and they'll be like, that house never existed. That house burned down 30 years ago or something. So that was one of my favorites. People were just like so locked in and so excited to make something about that experience in that specific place. It was really, really great.
Yeah. And I think that's also the value that I see just as an outside observer, never having done a game jam, in like the games that come out of jams, whether or not they're about a creepy house that is a once in a lifetime experience, they do kind of like distill, it seems like, the vibe of whatever the event is. And I imagine that's really beautiful to be able to like almost track each event through the products that come out of them, which are of course not entirely representative, but a beautiful way to kind of capture lightning in a bottle, as it were. And your itch.io page plays host to some joyful lenses into your game jam experiences. One game that I wanted to shout out is Buzzwords, which is like a typing game about battling bugs, kind of Pokemon adjacent in that way. But people can go play for free in their browser right now. And the models you created for the game, in my opinion, are so cute and expressive, almost having a clay-like aesthetic, which connects back to the ZBrush anecdote, I now realize. And I was wondering like what game jams might bring out of you as an artist, particularly in contrast to the work you do for your day job, and why the context of working in a small team kind of with a time restraint, why is that meaningful to you, or what does it kind of bring out that's different?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's a game jam is a safe way for me to explore different art styles. And like, I can I tend to get inspired by like very specific things for a little while. So I was really into like clay models and old, like Nintendo Power covers that had these little dioramas on the magazine covers and stuff. I was really into that for a little bit. And I was like, I'd love to make a game that looks like that. But for Buzzwords, it was actually my boyfriend's first time doing a game jam. And he only knew how to do stuff with sprites, so like 2D sprites and mostly pixel art and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I can't hand off 3D models with rigs and materials. Like, that's going to overload his game jam experience. He should lean on kind of stuff he already knows how to do. So I was like, okay, I'll pre-render all of the sprites. I'll model everything, and then I'll take screenshots of them, and then we'll use the screenshots in the game. So he can still have a workflow he's comfortable with. I can still have the art style that I want. And then we'll spend less time like stepping on each other's toes, trying to get those things to mesh together.
Yeah.
And I think it's like kind of coming up with those solutions is like, you end up with something that's like you kind of have to let go of your vision really easily. Like, oh, it has to be this way. You can't, because there's another person and they're like going to have a thing that they want to accomplish. So it's like, okay, it becomes very easy to just throw that away. Be like, okay, I can't do that. What can I do next? And how does that make things easier or harder? And it becomes almost like your parameters are smaller, so it's much easier to just make those decisions and get unblocked. And you might come up with something very interesting or something that's very efficient or optimized or something as a result of just considering those barriers. And that's like something that's really great about jams is the limitations breed your creativity. And it makes it so you're just like, you can't think and spin your wheels endlessly. You have to just finish something and figure something out and cooperate with other people.
Yeah. That connects. I mean, you said it better than I ever could, but how I'm always interested by games whose limitations bring out, uniqueness and kind of a just a different way of looking at games, whether it's the mechanics or the art or what have you. And it seems like game jams are a great breeding ground for that kind of like elegance that can only be found in like simplicity or a time crunch, as you said. Just while we're on the topic, I was curious, perhaps some of the listeners are too, about like, how do you go about forming the kind of teams that work on game jam games? Is it more of like a process of like, all the artists over here, all the coders over here, and then you kind of pick teams or something? Or is it more organic
Yeah,
than
we
that? I was
have
just
done it that
wondering.
way.
Yeah.
It depends on the jam, but that is something that I think, especially since we're not like so flush with people here, like we get good jam attendance for big jams, but usually we have to kind of leverage like the university or something like that to make sure we have like tons of people. But that's
Mm,
something that I think forming teams when you're a stranger showing up to a jam, it's much easier if we just form teams for you.
yeah.
People are like afraid to approach people, and it becomes this like there's like a social barrier. So
Right.
for our bigger jams, that's like I think I spend a lot of my time doing is like I'll have a forum and be like, here, fill out the form, a scale of 1 to 5. How like comfortable are you doing a jam? Have you done them before? What do you like doing? Are you an artist, a programmer, or a musician? Or something else like a voice actor or something like that. And
Right.
then we kind of and like also what are you interested in making? What do you like making? What engines have you used before or software have you used before? And then from there, especially for our bigger jams, I spend like a very long time trying to like get those teams matched up by hand,
Yeah.
to like have a good spread of like making sure they'll be able to deliver something, a programmer who can definitely make and build something,
Yeah.
and an artist who can definitely deliver something, or maybe an artist who has never done it before and an artist who has done it a lot
Right.
or something like that. And that's kind of like setting people up for success. Once people know each other, they start to kind of be like, oh, we're going to do games together, or we're always going to jam together, or I like to float around to different people or something. But that's like the being part of a community kind of gives you access to that. So our
Right.
smaller jams, people will do a lot of solo stuff, or they might be like, oh, does anyone want to jam with me? like
Yeah.
and it becomes like the pressure is lower. But I think for that
Right.
intro, at least, it's good to be like, you're just going to be here and you're just going to do this. And then that's like another limitation. You're just in it. There's no excuse to back out.
Yeah. I was going to say it's kind of like, it does seem really hard as someone not knowing anyone in the community, like take the first step. But it's beautiful that after, you just sign up and go, you're like part of a team. And then you have folks in RVA game jams that you can know for the rest of your life and do stuff with, in smaller settings or what have you. Um, I was curious also about like, obviously you're working with a number of different engines throughout your career as a hobbyist game maker, as a professional game maker, and I was wondering like, do different engines, say like Godot versus Unity versus Unreal or any others, do they require vastly different techniques and inputs from artists like yourself? Are they mostly standard as far as you're just kind of exporting a certain type of file and someone else is doing it, or is it kind of all over the place?
For the most part, the yeah, exporting models and stuff is pretty much the same. Sometimes it'll be like this axis is the up axis, and another program will be like, no, this one is the up axis. Yeah, to be like making
Yeah.
sure the model is rotated the right way, like dumb stuff like that. But for the most part, there's the same tooling in different engines. It's just maybe more robust for certain things. So, like Godot is very streamlined and it has a lot of the tools that other engines have, but they're not always as robust. So like you can create materials and stuff, but you might not have as many options as Unity or Unreal, or it might not be as there's not as many options out of the box.
Hmm.
But it's still you can still get it to do those things.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have as much pre-made stuff for you to work with, I would say. And then Unreal is like so focused on more realistic or more ambitious, like high level graphic stuff. Um, by default that is just like doing anything. It's kind of like you have to strip back if you want to make something simpler looking, versus like Unity, you kind of can start from whatever point. You're like, oh, I'm making something really like it's going to be on a mobile device or something, and it's not going to have all
Mm-hmm.
this lighting and crazy stuff. And you can kind of just choose to
Mm.
have everything be set up for that. Unreal is like, oh, we have 800 types of lights and reflections and whatever. It's like, and it makes your computer run really slow. And then Godot is just like, yeah, whatever you want. You're starting from nothing, kind of. So it sort of depends on like what you're making. There, it can make some things much more complicated, but the tooling and stuff is like pretty similar.
Mm.
My process is pretty similar.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how just hearing, I always like hearing folks with more like actual hands-on experience with engines or behind the scenes thing describe them, because sometimes in this case it seems like the engine's abilities are kind of reflecting the ethos behind which they were made, you know, where it's like Unity was kind of an all-in-one thing, Unreal was like we're going to do things really realistic, and then Godot is like we're open source. But sometimes it's like
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
sometimes it's completely the opposite. So it's cool to hear you describe that. I was wondering, what are you working on day to day at Double Dagger for your job? What's the process of working on a team in a professional setting like, relative to kind of the game jam experiences we had just discussed?
It's a little bit different. Day to day, right now, I do a lot of character modeling. I'm like the lead modeler. We have a lot of folks who model as well, but they do more like props or level design based
Mm.
stuff. So I've done a little bit of like teaching some of the 2D art folks who wanted to learn Blender. I've been doing a little bit of that, like kind of walking them through it so they can make game assets too, which has been really fun and rewarding. Definitely have that feeling that, you know, it's a game development folks all really want to learn new skills and kind of like skill up and learn from each other and be able to make more things. So it's nice
Yeah.
to be in an environment that lets you do that, and Double Dagger definitely lets us do that. Um, but yeah, we have a lot of marketing stuff for Little Kitty, cross promotion stuff or commercial stuff. So sometimes we need special models for those, merchandise, like stuffed animals, need anything depicting Kitty that needs approval. The main
Mm.
character is Kitty. um, and things like that. So I'm spending a lot of time since the game has been out for almost 2 years now. We're doing updates and things like that. Some stuff I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about yet, but some things will be released this year. That'll be
Nice.
pretty cool. And then ideation for maybe other projects, but nothing is announced or set in stone or anything like that. So yeah, it's just kind of all over the place, but mostly modeling and stuff like that, and some external marketing stuff.
Cool. It seems, I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but I would love for you to confirm or deny that it seems like it at least keeps you on your toes in a fun way as an artist, where you're making all these different kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the indie game thing too, is that in a AAA company, you're usually doing one job. Indie games, you got to wear a lot of hats because we are all the departments at once, and we kind of share the load for all that extra marketing stuff, which really takes up so much of your development time.
Yeah.
Is like these people want to do cross promo with us. We want to do this. We have to meet with these people who want to do this, and they need this info from us, and they need videos of the game, and we need to have it in Japanese. We need to, you know,
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. And it's like you need tons of people to do that, and we don't have the resources to hire. You know, we could. It would just feel like it'd be a lot more work, and it would be very expensive. So we have to do all that stuff too. So a very you see the whole process from
Yeah.
porting and launching and localization and all of those things. Yeah, indie games, you really get a piece of the whole picture. You're not kind of a cog in the machine, which I really like about it too.
Yeah, in a way, it's unfortunate that like indies are in the current marketplace almost have to compete or put on the same standard as a company that has far more resources and like, you know, marketing people to do the marketing and kind of this more split up structure with expertise. But also, I imagine it provides somewhat of a proving ground for like skilling up and learning from each other, that could potentially enhance
Mm-hmm.
collaboration. So that's one of those counterintuitive potential benefits. Um, if you could give some advice to an aspiring game artist, what would it be?
Definitely to chase the thing that you love doing. It'll probably shine through in your work if you're passionate about making a certain type of art, whether it's the subject matter or the discipline that you're really into. For me, it was animals and creatures and colorful, stylized characters. And if I hadn't pursued that, I don't think my portfolio would have stood out. And if you find a niche, like you'll always have people who are coming to you for the thing you're good at and not for the like five other skills that you kind of also have. Like they want to be able to just look and say, this person does awesome humans, this person does awesome anime models, this person does this. And that's what they're going to remember. So I think like focus really in on that one thing that you are passionate about so that people can see it and you're always tied with that image with people and you'll always be able to have work in that association in people's minds.
I love when advice intersects with like passion and fun, where it's like just do what you find fun, and if you do it for long enough, it's gonna help you stand out. And I think that as an artist it's great to hear you say that, because I interview a lot of like more developers and programmers on the show to date than I have artists, and I feel like the advice is a lot more, not in a negative way, but like samey, in that it's kind of, you're writing the same code, you're kind of following the same procedure to work within an engine. And for artists, which is, inherently more of a creative endeavor, it's great to hear that the uniqueness and kind of earnestly finding what you enjoy is a huge part of the process, it sounds like, of finding success. That's something that I find really inspiring, even as, a non-artist myself. So I hope folks do as well. I was wondering what your perspective on this upcoming question is, which is like, if you had a megaphone that could like reach all the people who identify as game players but have no interest in making games, what do you wish they could know about the like creatives whose art they consume, kind of giving them more of an introduction to what goes into making a game?
Yeah, this is a great question because I feel like people right now are very heightened about the way they react to games, like increasingly. But I think the number one thing that I want people to think before they leave an angry comment on the Game Awards or whatever it is that they're mad about is like, we want to make things that you like. Like, we want to make things that you love. We're people who do this as a job, and like we have a job just like you do, and we're frustrated by things just like you are, and we're very emotionally attached to making stuff. It's impossible to work on a game for years and then have the cathartic moment of releasing it and getting feedback from people and not feel personally, at least a little bit, like emotionally vulnerable about that, and like really wanting people to have a good time. And like, we don't want you to experience bugs, and no one's like out to get you, I guess, on the development team. We make things for players. You're already being catered to, I guess. And it feels like sometimes people lose sight of that, and they're like, it's like a combat between players and developers, and it's like, we want you to like it. We love that you're playing our thing. It's crazy. That's why we made it.
Yeah.
Why are you mad?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time what's really sad to me is that this inherent like reciprocity and connection is so lost almost immediately when like money comes into it. It seems like, where players are like, well, I paid for this, so I need it to be perfect. And devs are like, we're struggling here in a lot of cases with indies too, just trying to make something you like you said. And so one of my intentions behind doing this show, I hope, is that like someone can listen to it down the road and be reminded or remember that, it's not, like you said, one versus the other. It's more like all the boats rise when we enjoy something and can engage with it, and think critically about it, even if, that does result in like critical feedback or some like suggestions. It doesn't have to be like a war. It can be more of a discussion or something to connect over, which I find a lot more heartening. What's something that keeps you feeling whole and nourished by life outside of games?
Oh, outside of games, I spend so much time playing games and making games, but yeah, the rest of the time I love cooking, I love weightlifting, and I love painting. Just for fun though. I don't sell these things or whatever. They're kind of just for me. So I always tell people that I'm like, these are the things that fill my meters until
Yeah.
I play a lot of video games. But I'm like, yeah, I gotta do the stuff that's just for me, and like my all my meters have to be full. I need some me time, or I need to just make something for fun that is no one's even going to look at it, but the process of doing it makes me happy, or cook something for me and my partner or whatever. It's just like something unrelated to games or organizing games or playing games, like just to completely disconnect. Yeah, definitely stuff that is like physical in the world. I can feel myself doing it. Um, yeah, I think that's how I spend my time outside of games.
Yeah, I know for me, even just like a little intentional time spent outside of like making content about games or playing games can also inspire so much more joy when coming back to the hobby or the work in your case.
Hmm.
And it sounds like that's similar for you. You mentioned you play a lot of games. Obviously, I was wondering. You also talked about some of the early influences of Okami. Watching your brother play Doom. What are some of the more? They don't have to necessarily be recent, but I just wanted to give you a space to gush about some of your favorite games, if that's something you're interested in doing.
Oh, oh, for games, I don't know. I just spent a full work week worth of time playing Slay the Spire 2 this past week.
Hell yeah!
I love a turn-based game, a roguelike. I loved like Nuclear Throne, The Binding of Isaac. Definitely played a lot of like those early indie game the movie era type games.
Yeah.
But I also loved, I don't know, Expedition 33 was really good. I actually watched my partner play that one, so I haven't played it myself yet. But, you know, there's just so much to be inspired by. Um, yeah, I played so much Pokemon, the trading card game on the phone. I've been playing that a
Yeah.
lot. You can see a trend. Oh, man. Yeah. I play a lot of JRPGs as well, like
Oh,
the
cool.
Trails series. I enjoy those.
Yeah.
I like some Animal Crossing. I don't know. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great. I love one of the things that I find just so kind of strange about games is that like a visual novel is put in the same like mental category as like like Slay the Spire, where it's like
Hmm.
these two things could not really be much more different, and yet like folks who are gamers oftentimes like try to sample something from a lot of different genres, and I think it's beautiful that within one hobby, in air quotes, we can have so many different experiences and choices. So thank you for going through and mentioning some of your favorites. um, this is totally up to you now, my last question, but I was wondering, we've talked about Little Kitty Big City. I was wondering if you wanted to plug any other game projects. I know you mentioned you have one on Kickstarter or going up on Kickstarter. If not, that's totally fine, and I'll just edit this part out, but I would love to give you space to do that if it's of interest.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Little Kitty Big City is available on all platforms, and there'll be maybe even more platforms this year. It's looking like.
Oh,
I
cool.
also have been making character models for a VR game that should be coming to mobile. It's a pet simulator, so you can get a pet that never dies. It's called Forever Pets, and that will
Cute.
be getting a Kickstarter later this year. I think you can probably find it if you just look up Forever Pets
Hmm.
on Kickstarter. I think you can get reminders for it. It's not fully announced yet. And then the last studio I worked for, Subliminal, has Button City Football Club available to wishlist on Steam. I think that should be out in the next year or so. So if you like low poly, cute animal adventures with arcade soccer, that's a game for you.
I was gonna say that crosses up a few of my different niches, so I was heartened to hear that you're working on that one, or worked on that one, I should say. But Val, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, taking some time out of your schedule to talk about games and talk about RVA Game Jams and your work. It's been such a great time for me. So thanks so much again for being on.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the thoughtful conversation.
There really aren't many things I love more in life than thoughtful conversation. That was Val, an incredible artist, speaker, community organizer. What an honor to get the chance to talk to her and hear more about her work and her work in games professionally, in games as hobbies, in organizing Richmond, Virginia's grassroots games community. I particularly enjoyed the anecdote about how after the pandemic, as things were kind of starting back up and people could get together again, she was organically kind of thrust into the position that would eventually become chair. I just think that that's such a beautiful representation of community engagement with no strings attached, expecting nothing in return beyond the joy of making games with cool people. So so much reverence for Val and her work, and that's a conversation I'll remember for a very, very long time. So thank you so much for being here and for listening along and for engaging with the Indie Game Garden community, helping kind of connect our game spaces, our small and independent game spaces. It does mean the world to me, really. So thank you, and thanks again, Val. As far as a little game spiel this week, some games I'm looking forward to playing are the visual novels in my life that I have been neglecting, and I'm excited because my Vita journey, my setting up the perfect PS Vita for me, it's coming real close to an end. And as a part of that journey, I've been given access to the Danganronpa series on its original hardware, the House in Fata Morgana, which is one of the highest rated games on Metacritic ever, showing the passion of its fan base, if nothing else, and Steins Gate, which is a classic visual novel, kind of a foundational entry in the genre. And visual novels have been particularly impenetrable to me during my kind of resurgence in games, my resurging interest in games that happened after college, just because I was getting wrapped up in the mechanics and how I thought I was a deck builder person kind of mainly, and everything else was just a passing hobby. But I see so much art and I see so much joy in visual novels, and I think they'll be really good for me in winding down before bed. That's something that I found with my experience playing The Drifter, was like, that game was pushing it as far as like the mental stimulation and the kind of like active puzzling that turned my brain on rather than helping it wind down. And I think like visual novels would be a much better way for me to connect with my joy of reading before bed and integrating my games hobby into that. It's one of the beautiful things about the sentiment I expressed in the interview regarding how we all call ourselves games enthusiasts. Probably if you're listening to this, you do. And yet that can mean so many different things for so many different people, whether you're someone who just plays Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley and have hundreds of hours in those games, to someone like me who enjoys kind of checking out new and old indies, to someone who's all across the map, which was more what Val was saying. We're all part of a community, and I hope that, just like Val was saying again, we can allow for the fact that we're all in this together and we all want the same thing, which is to have fun and stimulating experiences playing games. And I think one of the things that the conversation with Val taught me and brought to the forefront of my mind is how important community is as a part of that process, not just to be around people, not just to kind of get the human interaction that we all need to a degree, even the biggest introverts among us. But at its core, community in games is the reason why we play, and the reason we like, talking about the gaming experiences that we're having, and that being almost a game, or at least an experience that can bring so much pleasure in itself. That's something I'm really excited to continue engaging in with this show, continue engaging in the spaces that I kind of inhabit, and it's an honor to do that alongside you, the listener. So if you've been getting a lot out of this, please help kind of grow this little community by telling just one friend. I do nothing to market the show, so it would mean a lot to me. Just a little bit of word of mouth there. You can also subscribe to me on YouTube at Indie Game Garden, have an Instagram under the same name, and I'm on Blue Sky at Darth Malks. Thank you so much for sticking with me so far. It was a joy to finally have our first woman on the show. That's something that I want to continue engaging with in the coming weeks. And luckily we have another woman coming on soon, Charlene Putney, who I've been really looking forward to interviewing, has done some fascinating things in games, including working on Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate 3, now starting her own studio, which we'll get into a lot more, making a game called Sparrow Warfare. So look forward to that. Look forward to me continuing to bring on guests of different identities as much as I can, and just centering perspectives that don't always get enough play in the, in air quotes, industry, which, as I more and more think about, continues to just kind of devolve, if you will, into a series of interconnected spaces. And the great thing about interconnected independent spaces is that we can have a lot of passion for them, and we can wear a lot of different hats, and we can be together in our love of games. So I'll leave you with that this week. Thanks again to Val for such a wonderful conversation, and I'll be back with you next time. Bye.